My name's Nick Fine, and I want to talk to you today about psychology and UX. As Dan very nicely said on the introduction, there isn't enough science in UX, and you probably know this yourselves right now. I'm on a bit of a crusade, or a mission, to bring science into UX. And what I want to do today is, in about the next 15 to 20 minutes, very rapidly take you through how you can be more scientific, how you can power your research with science, and effectively, why isn't psychology more of a deal in UX? First of all, how many people have got a psychology degree in the room? Good, we're amongst friends. Okay, I've got about 20 minutes and I'm going to go really fast. If you have questions, come talk to me afterwards. So, what we'll be covering today. First of all, what is psychology and how do you research to identify behavior? And then, more importantly, how do you design for behavior? What we won't be covering is the first year of a psychology undergraduate course in 20 minutes. It's just not possible. I can't go into much detail. If you have questions, talk to me at the end. And I'm not going to give you exact design solutions. Everybody wants a playbook, and there just isn't one. I'll talk to you about that later if you want to. My UX journey, I'll go through this very quickly. I'm qualified, I've been doing stuff. I was a head of UX for a while. Management was boring, and I'm now I'm staying a practitioner. Being in front of people and human behavior is where my passion is at. So, psychology. Psychology is the study of human behavior. And UX is the practice of achieving optimal human-computer interaction. So answer me this question. If they're both involved with human behavior, and one is interactive and one is more general, why aren't UX and psychology married? Why? It's a genuine question. I mean, it's rhetorical, but it's a genuine question. Why aren't psychologists everywhere in UX? So what is psychology? So for those of you who aren't psychologists, I'm just going to give you a quick overview as to what psychology is. Psychology is lots of things, and I've picked out a few practices or specializations within psychology to highlight to you. So, rapidly, social psychology. It's a scientific study of how people think, feel, and behave. Lots of interpersonal and interaction stuff going on here, i.e. human-to-human interaction. But if you look down this bullet list here of attitudes, interpersonal interaction, conformity, group behavior, you can see how leveraging group behavior, triggering the herd behavior, is huge for you, for your audience. Biological psychology, which really is just talking about saying that behavior comes from within, if you know what I mean, comes from biology rather than from brain. Less relevant, but there are some very specific applications of biological psychology or behavioral neuroscience in the world today. Behavioral psychology, which is one of my favorites. I've seen a few dogs knocking around. Pavlovian conditioning, operant conditioning, all about how you can trigger behaviors in people. Developmental psychology is all about how we change over time. And for many brands, this is a huge important thing because it's a long-term relationship with the brand. And as you change, your relationship with the brand changes, your needs change. Cognitive psychology, one of the most popular angles of psychology in UX, because it deals with everything in this black box of ours. Cognitive psychology is really interesting in that you can't really look inside the box, you can only see the inputs and the outputs. But it's really important. Memory, attention, perception, all of these things are directly relevant to both research and design. Clinical psychology, much less relevant, but again, some very specific practical applications of it. And educational psychology, how do we learn? Very important again for some brands where learning and acquiring the brand itself or something very technical about it is very important. And my personal favorite is personality psychology. This is my specialist area. I'm all about psychometrics and measuring personality, and then more importantly designing for it, and I can bore you senseless with my thesis work on this. Right, so let's get into the interesting stuff. That's the foreplay. If you want to design for behavior, first of all, you have to be able to identify it. And this is not easy. So how do you do it? Obviously, user research. Now, you can direct observation is, in my humble opinion, the gold standard of research. In a UX lab, an observation lounge, observation suite, any of those sorts of things, ethnographic, contextual inquiry, actually directly observing people doing things. indirect observation, which is directly relevant to our hosts Chattermill and Usabilla, remote user testing, and web analytics, which again is indirect observation, but between direct and indirect, and as HelloFresh was saying, aggregating silos, you're getting lots and lots of different research perspectives which give you that holistic view. And of course, literature review, which is close to my heart, but there isn't anywhere near enough literature access in the commercial world by people. There's so much, there's a gold mine of stuff, and we're going to come and talk about behavioral hooks. This is where you're going to find them. But I don't have a PhD. You don't need a PhD to do science, okay? You just need to think like a scientist. One of my favorite quotes is this one on the right here. Be a scientist, not an expert. The one on the left, is a scientist is someone who observes and wonders, shares their ideas and discovers, listens to ideas, explores. That's not an exclusive set of traits. Anybody in this room can do that. But there are some conditions. These are the sorts of traits that a good scientist holds. Some objectivity. You are not the user. And you guys all know that as UX people, but it's a strong message. Rigor, that attention to detail that every agency and every designer has hammered me with. That attention to detail is absolutely critical. Humility. Be a scientist, not an expert. I'm not really an expert. I mean, there's a slide coming up in a minute that says, I'm not the oracle, I'm not the guru, I don't have all the answers, but I do have all the methods to find the answers. And that's what this is about. And finally, impartiality. There are a ton of cognitive biases, and I'm going to show you an example in a moment. Ultimately, these sorts of traits lead to cornerstones of science, which are reliability and validity. This is what separates the good researcher from the bad, and this is what will drive value in your businesses. So validity. Validity talks about how real is your insight. How closely does what you measured, observed match the real world? So if I've measured this glass of water, or the volume of it, if you did it, are you going to measure the same amount of water? So yes, how factually correct, how real. If you develop your products and services on invalid insights, it's not going to turn out well. It's not going to turn out the way you thought it would. Reliability, how consistent are your results? Are they repeatable? How robust are they? And cognitive biases. There are thousands of cognitive biases, but these are effectively glitches in our thinking that cause us to make questionable decisions and reach erroneous conclusions. Beautiful example here. I've read the rhetoric from both sides. Time to do my own research. Literally the first link. Bingo. This happens all day and all night. You have to be very, very conscious of yourself to make sure that you're not doing this, and you'll do it anyway. That's the nature of cognitive biases. So, what we really are talking about here is looking for behavioral hooks. These are hooks that you can hang things on, designs on. These are ways of connecting with your audiences. But finding those hooks is tough. So some examples of behavioral hooks. The number of visits prior to purchase. It might be an attitude towards a thing, like a retirement home. Heart, head, and hands, that old agency cliche, which is so very true. The heart being the passionate, emotional part of the purchase or the transaction. The head is the sensible, kind of logical planning, and the hands is the practicals. And often these are combined. So the heart and the hands are one and the head is another, and you guys know all this stuff, I hope. TLDR, the call of the millennial. Too long, didn't read or didn't watch. If you know that about your audience, you can design to it. You have précis at the top of or the bottom. Don't make the millennial read stuff that they don't want to read, or make it very visual. Herd behavior, triggering the herd is one of my favorites. Scarcity principles and things like that. There are some very, very well-established hooks out there which you can use in your brands to get people to buy or use your stuff. In a nutshell, make money. And finally, the golden user needs. Everything comes down to a user need. If you understand your user's needs in the greatest of details, you can do anything. You meet their needs in the way that is good for them, everybody's winning. So, the magical combination, should we say, the solution of Usabilla and Chattermill together will help you find these hooks. There are many ways of doing this, but capturing and analysing is an excellent perspective of many. So how do you design for these hooks? Now, if you think I'm going to give you a playbook, think again. Some hooks have really obvious design solutions. Special offers, buy nows, you offer their closing deal on the third visit, you know, that kind of stuff. Whereas others have been designed for by competitors, and there's tons and tons of literature on it. If you read Dr. Susan Weinshank's book, Neuro Web Design, it is a cover-to-cover packed full of hooks. However, wait, their users may not have the same needs as your users. So what you really want to do is to use those as hypotheses to test on your own brand, on your own product or service. And as I was saying earlier, I don't have all the answers, but I do have the methods to get the answers. And so this is what we're really talking about. In terms of designing for these hooks, it's about testing and learning. And anybody that says there's a playbook is just frankly wrong or misleading you. So first of all, and I was delighted to hear HelloFresh talking about generating hypotheses and testing them. It makes my little cold dark heart sing. What would happen if I display remaining stock levels? Will it increase? You know, so the scarcity principle, everybody's using this stuff, you know, merchandising. If you provide a deal on their third visit, does it cause a sale? For more service-related stuff, does a what you'll need section save time and dropout, which it 9 times out of 10 does? Or do men spend more or less time making a decision about X, Y, or Z than women, gender differences? Does providing a TLDR summary at the top increase click-through with millennials? So, test your users with actual users of the product or service. And I do mean actual users, not your colleagues, your friends, your family. The MVT team, if you've got a multivariate team, you've got a web analytics team at your business, are obviously your best friends. And if you haven't got a very, very strong working relationship with them, you need to cultivate one. It's absolutely critically important. The relationship of UX or HX with web analytics is absolutely powerful. It will save you a lot of time. All your lab work, all of your ethnographic work really gets focused and delivers under MVT conditions, or AB. So build a prototype and test it with actual users, lab, remote, guerrilla. Now, you must observe behavior as well as listening to what they say. You have to do the direct observation as well as the indirect. It's absolutely critically important, and the success of your project absolutely hangs on it. Because what people say and what people do are usually very, very different things. I don't know if you've spent any time in a lab or observing in a lab. You'll watch somebody struggle over to do something and they just can't find the call to action, or they're scrolling around and they're struggling, and you'll help them out. And then at the end, in the wash-up, you'll say, well, how was that? And they'll go, it was great, I loved it, it was amazing, blah, and they're just infusing. And that's acquiescence. That's acquiescence in play. And so observing what they do and what they say, you will see the difference. That's because people tend to say their aspirations rather than their actual behavior. They report what they want, not what is. And it's unfortunate, but it happens all day and all night. So observed behavior is usually more accurate than self-reporting, but the truth really is that it's a balance of both. Okay, you need the direct and the indirect. Use at least 5 people, but more is always better. Now, I say 5 people, I get into running arguments with people all day and all night about the Norman Nielsen 80% 5 users thing. If you think that Oracle or IBM test or Google with 5 users and then release, you can think twice, okay? The other strong argument is that 5 people will get you 80% of the major problems. But what about the minor problems or the other 20% of the major problems? It's not enough. It's not sufficient. More is usually always better. It is perfectly acceptable to do cascading 5s. So 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 until you reach a level of confidence. Obviously, iterate, iterate, iterate. I want to believe that everybody in this room is part of an agile pod and the waterfall thing is firmly dead. An iteration, you're probably iterating each sprint once every 2 weeks. Fabulous. Good idea is to test your colleagues' prototypes and vice versa. It's not great practice to test your own prototypes because of the inherent bias. you are going to unknowingly completely bias your own study. Not the end of the world if you can't. I mean, better to test it yourself than not test it at all. Store your insights in personas. Now, I started off life hating personas, hating them. I made quite a strong argument against them in my thesis. What if you're not like the persona, right? Now, I've turned 100% around, and I'm a big, big fan of personas, and I'll tell you why. Personas are intergenerational communications tools. Now, when I say intergenerational, I mean corporate generations. You're going to spend a lot of time learning things about your audiences, a lot of time. And you're going to, usually when you leave the business, all that knowledge goes with you. Your businesses, your brands need to learn about your audiences over time, over many years, and it can't be related directly to the consultant, to the practitioner. So if I learn everything about the project I'm on and go, the next guy or girl is going to come in and have to learn exactly the same stuff. What you really want is to stand on my shoulders and again and again and again. So that means in 10 years' time, what started off was some really not great personas, and what they end up are refreshed every quarter, every year, really up-to-date, super detailed, amazing personas that are 100% data-driven. In that way, you are able to convey behavior over many, many years and to watch the change. Now, not many people are doing this, so I'm giving you this massive nugget. Make sure you've got really good data-driven personas. Make sure you share them around your businesses as widely as is reasonably possible. Okay? These personas cannot be works of fiction. I hope you all know that. I've seen so many really bad personas where people have gone, John likes driving a BMW and wears a Cartier, and he's never spoken to John. He just thinks that's what Johns do. It's not right. And obviously update them regularly with fresh data. Always with data, not with fiction. Okay? Always. They are repositories. They are storages of insight. So finally, in order to kind of focus all of this work, I've created a psychology channel called UXPsychology on YouTube. What I'm trying to do is to get a lot more research into UX and a lot more scientific research into UX. It was the case about 10, 15 years ago that there wasn't very much research done. And it was all about doing some research better than none. But it's 2018 and we've had UX for a good 10 or 15 years now, and it's time to up our game. UX and user research needs to go up a couple of levels. There's too many examples of people speaking to a couple of people and saying, that's great, you know, they didn't like the lasagna, I asked 2 people. It's not good enough, it's not okay. So it's not rocket science, it's not about rocket science, it's about good science, okay? But you don't need to be a scientist to do it. I can talk to you about that in incredible detail later on, and there's a video that I put up there last week. So, that's it from me. Thank you very much for having me. If there's any questions that you have, please come talk to me afterwards. I'll be floating around. Thank you.